I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is a bonus episode of News du Jour. Welcome, Lauren and Leah. Tell us a little bit about your family heritage and how you guys have connected with it.
Well, thank you, Annie, for inviting us to chat with you today. We love storytelling, so hopefully this will be fun for us all. Leah, I definitely want to tag team this. The story of our heritage and our family is like everyone, pretty long and extensive, but just to hit the highlights, I guess. Leah and I are Afro-Indigenous. We're 8th generation to Oklahoma, by way of several other states in the southern United States. So, and then more broadly, in parts of Western and South Africa, and also Mexico. So we touch a little bit of everywhere, but feeling very kindred to Oklahoma, as it's been like our first and only home.
Perfect. How about you, Leah?
I like this question because it makes me really think about that word heritage, and what that means. And I think that I think it's important for everyone to recognize, like, we all have heritages and we all come from places, and there are things that we inherit and that we're carrying forward in the world that maybe we do so unconsciously even. Like, one of the things that I love to think about where my heritage is concerned are some of my hobbies and interests. I've actually learned are somehow like a part of this larger family story. Like, when I was younger, I loved to collect little porcelain shoes, and it became like a whole thing. Like, I had a curio cabinet full of these little keepsakes. And then one day, my grandmother shared with me that I actually had a great great aunt who also collected porcelain shoes, and they managed to find these shoes, and then they got passed down to me. And so when I'm thinking about heritage, I think about, like, yes, where we're from and how much that plays into who we are, but also all of these little things that come out in personality and interest, and the way that we eat and the way that we talk, and the people that we are like connected to. All of those things have been inherited too. So yeah, you're right, Lauren. There's such a broad way of like so many broad ways that we've inherited, like different places and regions, cultures, languages, but there are also like recipes and stories and quirks and hair length and things like that
And like mannerisms.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
I love that. Yeah. I know you guys have a strong sense of like your past, and you're like some of the few people who I feel like post a lot about like your family, like your grandparents and things like that, and I really connect with that, and I love that. I think that connection to the past like is just so fascinating and helps us connect more deeply to ourselves. So you guys have mentioned privately to me that you connected with your native heritage a little bit later in life. So, what did that look like and how did that kind of play out? What unique challenges do you guys find with the intersectionality of being Afro-Indigenous?
This is a loaded question.
Yeah, it's, man, I feel like we could have, oh man, like hours and hours of conversation on this, but Leah, do you want to like take a stab at it?
Yeah, I will. Being Afro-Indigenous, there are so many systemic reasons why Afro-Indigenous people, and really, actually, I should say the larger Indigenous community, can become disconnected from culture, from language, from um, practice, from medicine,
Food,
food,
religion.
yeah, and even just from each other. One of the most recent reasons, and I think this was in a large way the breaking point in our family away from our indigenous cultures and relatives, what were the boarding schools that were implemented here on Turtle Island. And that was a process really of just like trying to, the phrase was like, kill the Indian, save the man. So, in that thinking, indigenous religion, indigenous culture, even just like ways of dressing and presenting, were seen as like less human or wrong. And so those schools are designed to make indigenous children, they started from a young age brainwashing children to deny themselves their own identity. And so, if I were to point to a reason why we've connected to indigeneity later, it would be because we come from that space where indigeneity was something to be ashamed about. So, in particular, our great grandmother, when asked about what it meant to be Choctaw, told you, Lauren, right? What did she say?
Yeah, I think, maybe 19. So I began reconnecting when I was 19, and it was sort of birthed out of curiosity, just around like who our family was. So we were raised in like largely predominantly like white spaces, and so I knew that like I in those spaces was like placed in the margins, and I wanted to understand why. I was just so curious. And anyway, so as I was researching what that meant, I started by trying to understand like what does it mean for me to be in these spaces to these other people, and how can I become palatable to people that have placed me in the margins, which I understand now how harmful that was to me. But anyway, as I was trying to understand, I was going to elders. They were my first access point to understand what it means to be a Black woman, what it means to be Chata, what it means to be Mexican. So anyway, yeah, I called this elder, and she scolded me for asking, and very straightforward in her response. Basically said, "Stop digging. We raised you American for a reason." And I didn't understand. It offended me and it hurt my feelings like in that moment. But it took a while for me to understand that what she was wanting for me was a chance at survival. And I think um, her like best gift for me in that moment was to teach me that you take on their ways, quote unquote, so that you can, so you can make money, and you can like survive in systems that attempted to erase our identities. So yeah, I Leah, I've like thought about that a lot over the years, that moment with her. And um, not long after that, maybe 3 or 4 years later, she passed away. And she left behind, it's interesting, in her like living and breathing, and um her name is Florida. So her Florida-ness on the earth, she was very adamant, like in her stance. But it's interesting, like what she left behind were just tons of clues about like our indigeneity and our like Mexican identity. So all in like photos and recipes, and the trinkets that she left behind that like sit on like on my shelf, or Leah's like on, I've seen things, Leah, like on your bedside table that are hers. And not just hers, but there are other indigenous elders that have left things for us. And in a way, it kind of like is this really beautiful pushback to this attempted erasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that whole thing, like the erasure wasn't just in indigeneity for me. I remember like being little and, only, I think in my like just being young, the most that I could, or like the most complex identity that I could really like grapple with at the time was just being a little Black girl. And that was super obvious to me, like that's what I am. And I remember like walking around grocery stores all together. There are 5 of us siblings, so it was like a big herd of Black kids like walking around with our mom trying to get groceries. And I remember our mom like being really open with us about, okay, when we go into this store, people are going to expect a certain set of things from you because of how we look. And so we're going to prove them wrong today. And that was sort of the way that I walked through the world. Like, I'm going to prove people wrong about what it means to be Black. I'm going to prove that Blackness is like you've used the word palatable. I'm going to prove that it's kind, that it's generous, that it's respectful and respectable. And looking back, I realized I was sort of adopting this respectability politic that asked me to take what is intrinsically me, which is kind of wild and like boisterous, and sort of stuff that down into a container that allowed everyone else to feel good around me. So part of reconnecting for me, not just as an Indigenous woman, but as a Black woman, as a Mexican woman, has been freeing myself, like really trying to discover who I am outside of trying to fit within a system that wants me to behave a certain way, Yeah. And I've also been so grateful for those who are also reconnecting around me, because and who are doing that work, I think, as marginalized people, to think about like, who are we really and how can we show up unapologetically as ourselves. That's a massive movement right now.
Absolutely.
And it's really exciting to see people free themselves up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine there would also be like a temptation to like rebel against that and just like be boisterous even if that's not your personality, because just like screw that. I don't want to fit into your mold. I can imagine that. But so like you guys have mentioned to me before that your family has been entrepreneurial like since they arrived in Oklahoma, which I also want to highlight that 8 generations in Oklahoma, for those of you who are not from here, is really far back. So I think that's a really interesting part of your family history. And so I'd love to hear more about how that led you guys into the entrepreneurial space and how you started your business.
Yeah. I'll start. I think for us, I think really the spirit of like the Perrys and the Smiths and the Jones and the Mason family, and the Palmers, all of those folks, the Holloways, like the spirit is leadership. I don't know that it's necessarily entrepreneurship. Like, to be honest with you, Annie, I don't know that I'm a great business person. Like, in terms of making money and like passing on wealth in that, like in that financial way, I don't think that's really my calling on earth. I think it's great when people can do it, but I think what our family has done is to generate a different type of wealth, and it usually comes through like leading community and like generating like some space for collective healing. We talk about that a lot, collective healing and community care. So like when our ancestor Ezel Willie Perry stepped on Oklahoma soil, he was coming as a pastor, and he was actually escaping a lynch mob. This history just got clarified for me, Lauren. I don't know if you heard Daddy say this, but he was telling me that he was escaping a lynch mob who was after him because he had witnessed an assault against a Black woman, and he was defending her. And so that incident ran him out of town. We had family already here in Ardmore who were connected to the church. And so he came to join the work here and then ended up building a huge community platform and safe space for Black people in Oklahoma City. So yeah, when I think about our entrepreneurship, even today, as much as I'm interested in like how to live well and how to support ourselves financially, I'm far more interested in how to support our community and how to lead people in their ideas, how to take care of people. So I think that might be the spirit that we're joining all those 8 generations back.
Yeah, we have had conversations as businesswomen. We've had conversations over the years about this desire to build generational wealth. And I feel like I had a breakthrough a handful of months ago about what that actually means. I had been pursuing like this, I don't know, I saw that in our society, what affords you like an easeability in life is lots of money. And while I know that money, like funding, backing, like of, you know, projects like what we have working now, while it's important, I think my mind has changed about what generational wealth actually is. I think for me, and obviously, like I am an evolving being, and I, you know, maybe, you know, you catch me when I'm 60 and I might say something different. But as I am pursuing like good eldership and becoming a good ancestor, where I sit now is that generational wealth is actually those things that I hope to pass down to descendants that are like what like fortifies the soul, like what makes a good woman, a good man, a good person in general. And what I think is I think we can arrive at, you know, those assets, if you want to call them assets. I think we can arrive at them through business, but I think there are other vehicles that help us arrive at wealth. I don't think that money is like the tool to arrive at like ease and comfortability, at peace. I think that's what we all really want, is peace. And I sitting here as like a very humbly paid artist, I know that like my peace does not come from money, you know, it doesn't come from wealth in the way that is like it has been peddled to me over the years. So yeah, I'm grateful for the example, you know, like to Leah's point, about our ancestors. I'm grateful for their leadership in my life, that their continued leadership. There are transcripts, and there's like that one ancestor that Leah mentioned, E.W. Perry. There's not an autobiography, a biography written by a historian, Oklahoma historian, named Gaskin. And he, yeah, like through his work, we get to know our ancestor. But then there are all these records, like what I was mentioning earlier, that are left behind. Like before that ancestor, there were ancestors here. We know that as far back as like our fourth great grandmother was born here, pre-statehood. And we know that, I don't know, like just her, like, the fact that like I exist means that she must have been one heck of a woman, you know what I mean? Yeah. And her people before her, our people before her. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the entrepreneurial spirit, I think it might look like that, like according to like a modern lens, but like Leah said, I 100% agree with that, Leah. Like, I think it's actually leadership, and like this will to survive, this will to like push past attempted erasure, and to be able to sit in that, I'm a proud daughter, you know? I'm a super proud daughter.
Yeah. Well, tell us about florals specifically. So I know from talking to you guys that, you know, florals mean a lot more to you than just a pretty arrangement that someone's gonna, you know, pick up when, you know, they need to apologize to their wife or something like that. It goes so much deeper with you guys. And definitely, if you guys haven't checked out their Instagram, you have to, because their floral arrangements are a work of art, truly. You can see that just on its face, but tell us a little bit more about what it means to you to work in florals and how you guys have incorporated that into your activism.
So yeah, the floral work that we do is born again and again out of an inspiration, or being inspired by the natural world and all that it yields. We believe that the earth like is our first mother, and she like continues to give and give and give. And I think flowers are this beautiful way to, I don't know, they're these beautiful like agents of beauty, that communicate like all kinds of things. You mentioned like, you know, like people looking for flowers as like a means to communicate, like, I don't know. Yeah, like whoops, you know.
Or I love you, or
yeah, I love you, or even like
I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, or we're celebrating a new life with you, or maybe like, it's funny, over the years we've had a lot of people reach out about condolences for pets. And yeah, flowers are these wonderful communicators. And so starting off, with the Wild Mother Creative Studio, we knew that flowers were just one vehicle toward expression. We're classically trained artists, and floral was one thing that we were able to lean back into that didn't feel, I don't know, it felt a little different than, the things that we're trained in. So it started as this way of communicating, love and other sentiments. But then as we were, becoming more acquainted with like just the world, I think I can say, like, in my early adult life, florals were a way to like get to know the world. We got to know business. We got to know like collaboration through florals. And then I think like, yeah, just looking back, flowers became this beautiful way of signaling or like catching people's attention, to then, like teach and to educate around things that are really important to us. So, we love to say that what we do at our studio is more than just flowers. It lives beyond just like that arrangement. So, we're excited about like that more than just flowers. That mantra that lives in our studio.
And just to jump in really quickly here, when she says it's attention grabbing, she's referring to large scale installation pieces that they will do in different places of significance. So it's not just like a small arrangement. I feel like that's important to the concept here. Like if you see this giant arch of florals, you're going to stop and say, what is going on over there, and want to investigate a little bit deeper, right? That's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah, totally. I think, we got to a point where, we started this conversation with heritage and like identity conversations, and all of those were like happening under the surface of our business, always, and even before thinking about what it was like for us to go into business together. And when you're like us, the like thinking about identity means you also are grappling with like these really hard histories, these like terrible, like I mentioned, Papa Perry's escaping a lynch mob. Like that's in our family, and he's not the first or the last really who's had to like deal with systemic racism. And our ancestors who were from Mississippi, who traveled on the Trail of Tears to end up here in Oklahoma, like those are the stories of our relatives. And so when like that has been going on under the surface of our business, thinking about systems of oppression, and thinking about what it means to enter these like other systems like of business or capitalism as Black women. So what we did was like, we kind of started out categorizing or compartmentalizing those two conversations, like wanting to just be businesswomen and show up and do good art. And we were mostly working in events at that time, like weddings. And then on this other side of us, we started having conversations we facilitated about systems of oppression, about racism, about history that gets erased or untold. And it became really obvious to us that those two things couldn't be compartmentalized anymore, that actually that was like taking a lot of energy from us, and that they were always meant to find each other somewhere in the middle. So yeah, the large scale installation thing was born out of a desire to marry art and activism. And our first project where we got to do that was something we called Send Flowers to Greenwood. So I think I said to you, Annie, once that flowers for me are like a gateway drug.
Yeah.
They're just like,
I love that.
yeah, it's kind of a crude way of saying it. Like it's just it's beautiful, and there's so many incredible like reasons to work with nature, but in actuality for me, like they're just a flare or a beacon where I can draw people close to us and then like whisper truth, like share history, and then ask people to participate in a process of like of the project is called Send Flowers to, of sending flowers, sentiment, like healing and care to these groups of people who have been systemically oppressed. So that marriage has begun to feel so good in our business. It feels like we've been working these last 9-ish, 10 years to kind of reach this moment of culmination.
Everything you guys create is so beautiful. And this is a big part of why I was excited to have you on the podcast. But also, I'm like, podcast doesn't do it justice because these people need to see what you create too. So I highly recommend you guys check out their Instagrams, just because that's the best place to see a lot of their work in one spot. They absolutely, the flowers do create a sense of community by bringing people in. And in that same line of thinking, do you guys want to touch on the conversation workshops? How were those born and why are they important to you? How do they work, etc.?
Yeah, those were born in 2016. There was an incident that was pretty public. It was like a Facebook Live video that went viral, of a police killing of an unarmed Black man. And then I think a day later, there was another that popped up, and it was probably the first. Those names are Alton Sterling, Philando Castile. It was probably the first time for me that I found myself, like I think I'd always felt grief about the story of being Black in America, but this felt like I was grieving a brother. It felt deeply personal, and when things are personal like that, I tend to move right into action. Like, well, what can I do? So Lauren and I were having those conversations, like couldn't sleep late at night. Like, what do we do about this grief that we feel? And at the same time, we were noticing like folks on social media trying to grapple with these conversations too. And it's obvious that social media is not the best place to like facilitate that. Yeah. So we just decided basically like, what if we host a chance for people to gather and to talk about these two incidents and to express the grief that they feel and to ask questions, and what is it like to bring like different ages and races around one another and just kind of dialogue about this really big thing we all witnessed. So we did. We put an all call out, and our parents invited, whatever shenanigans we were up to into their house. And literally 65 people showed up that day. And they were like peppered all over the living room and in corners where nobody sits. And it was such a symbol for me of like, wow, people really want to discuss systemic racism. They really want to discuss police brutality. They really want to talk about how that impacts our local communities. And it's sort of like we got bit by a bug. So we started facilitating conversations like that. And eventually a couple of friends of mine joined us to create a curriculum where we could like actually guide that in a way that where we like feel really comfortable and there's some like good result. It's not just like a runaway train conversation,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So we built a curriculum called the conversation workshops, and we facilitate those in pre-existing communities. So groups of people who already know each other, work together, live together, worship around one another, whatever that looks like. And essentially, the goal is to teach them a conversation style for well, there's a couple goals. I'll back up. First, we ask people to acknowledge their relationship to systems of racism, and that's a really interesting and hard thing to do, whether you are in a minoritized group or you're not. Like asking people to acknowledge, like, I'm a part of this or I'm impacted by this, and getting them to think about how and why. That's our section, our first section. And then in the second section, we teach a conversation style for addressing racism when you see it around you. And in the third section, we teach some practical steps for engaging the world around you. Like when you're within a community, how we can like see about impacting in like long lasting ways. So that's what that curriculum is. And it's great because it lives online now. So you can be a pre-existing community and hire us as facilitators through that process. Or you can also just go and like gain access and do your own like self-paced dive through the course, whatever feels comfortable. And it has been a really beautiful way to talk about things that we really care about.
I think another thing that happened along the way, we were fielding a lot of inquiries from small businesses, specifically creatives that are maybe lacking accessibility, or maybe they feel as if they're lacking accessibility to curriculums like the one that we wrote. So we started to feel like, man, we're answering a lot of questions. Like our inbox would be full of people wanting to either spend one-on-one time with someone from our team, or they would want to have questions answered via email. And it kind of felt a little overwhelming in a good way. Like there were people that were wanting to engage that conversation. So we decided to create a second curriculum that was fashioned for creatives. And so a lot like conversation workshops, we were asking people to evaluate their own proximity and even like investment into systems of oppression, and then how to pivot away, how to create life-giving or harmless relationships to community, and not ones that harm folks. So anyway, we created a course called Lay of the Land. It also lives online. And it's one that like a lot of times people ask, like, so I'm a photographer, or I'm a calligrapher, or I'm a fashion designer. What does this look like for me? And I think I'm confident in this work enough to say that I think any creative, or not, honestly, could engage that work, and they would be able to ask the questions, or thoughtfully process through the questions and the prompts, and use their own lens, and they would be just fine. So one of my favorite things about Lay of the Land is that we spend a lot of, not a lot, but we spend some time at the very beginning encouraging people to gain their footing around their own origin story, and not just their personal origin story, but how to tell or acquaint people with like their origins around business as well. And so anyway, we are trying to give people a really good foundation, or encouraging like understanding the foundation, so that you can do community care from a position of like advocacy or allyship in a really thoughtful way, in a way that is going somewhere and not just to like check a box, you know.
Yeah.
I think we've all been acquainted with folks that are performative in their work and in their allyship, and I don't know, while the heart or the intention might be good behind it, unless it's effective, I don't know, it doesn't really serve anybody. So yeah, the conversation workshops were a really good foundation for a lot of the other things that we have put out into the world, and I'm just really grateful for that time to steep in even like understanding the pedagogy behind like teaching community care, and like yeah, and like helping people talk through really tough conversations like implicit bias, and understanding like systemic racism and systematic racism. And yeah, it's a niche conversation but I think it's one that like literally everyone needs to engage, you know.
I'm really excited to do a conversation workshop with you guys at some point. I also wanted to say, you know, you were saying like when somebody's like activism is performative, it doesn't serve anybody, but I feel like a lot of times it serves them, and that's what's like so tough to watch about it. A lot of times I think is like you see that it's self-serving. It's like making them look better. Again, it centers around them and doesn't move the needle forward for the cause. But anyway, I wanted to ask you guys just really quickly as sort of a wrapping up question, like what do you each like, what is the most important issue to each of you in terms of activism? Like what are you looking to make an impact on individually going forward?
That's a good question.
I know, I like to dive deep around here. I'm not going to give you any, no soft toss questions. They're all going to be really hard.
I think I sit in a space now where I am so I have a lot of conviction around identity, and clearly understanding identity, and and also connection to your identity. I have a lot of well, I'll just use myself as an example. I would say, like, people would ask like, what are you? Or like very broad questions that were I know well-meaning people, you know, would ask, but I, you know, it caused me to sort of like have to answer that question for myself, you know, before spouting out or spouting off answers. And I learned a lot about myself, and why I do certain things, or why I feel certain ways, or I don't know, like even Leah, you mentioned early on in this conversation about quirks, like why I don't know, some of the quirks that I have. I think that something that is so important to me, and I hope people feel this around me or feel encouraged to like dig in to this one thing, and that is understanding that our origins predate our birth, and we are the harvest of seeds planted a long time ago. Whether, I don't know, like whether it was like unbeknownst to our like ancestors or not, like we are living in things that and living in spaces and in history, in a yeah in a way that I think was spun out way before we were born. So I'm really passionate about understanding yourself, and then doing work outside in the community. Like right now we're doing a lot of work in like educating around MMIW, so missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis. And I should say, like, just to be clear, when I say women, I mean women, two-spirit, trans, non-binary, femme relatives in the Indigenous community. And what I realize, and you know, it's no surprise, but as I dig deeper, I'm like, wow, this is hitting so hard. The crisis as it is today is a byproduct of actions and beliefs and stances that were taken 400, 500, 600 years ago. So, to understand where our perspective, like where we sit here, I think is important to understand like who we are. You know what I mean? I don't know if I might be like clear as mud, but I think understanding ourselves is like a pin in the map. The map is expansive, and it's huge, and like context is everything, you know? So that's something that I'm really, really passionate about. And I think our projects at the Wild Mother and conversation workshops and, you know, other little things that we have, you know, going on right now that, you know, we haven't really shared yet. They're all, while they're about community, they're very much speaking to identity. And I think that's why I don't know, I get so energized. I'm so energized by this work. I think in a roundabout way, that's what I'm most passionate about.
Perfect.
Yeah, I see that in you, Lauren. Like every time you do your work, I see you like interacting with people and trying to get to the root of who they are. And that feels like really caring, you know, like I think, and I also think for activists or for people who just like are allies or they just care about these topics, I think in a lot of ways we jump right toward the solution, like trying to figure out how to fix things, which I told our story from 2016. That's exactly where we were. Like,
how did that?
Yeah. It makes so much sense, but there's this step that I think is like lesser attended to, and that actually really matters. And that is like checking in with you and finding an authentic way to address the issue that you're passionate about. So I like that. I like that you said that. I have a million things I want to do by the time I die. There's so many things, and I'm like, man, if I could get my hands on this, if I could change this. So when you ask that question, I'm like, oh God, how do I give one answer?
I know.
but the thing that I keep coming back to in like I think it's just been like the last 5 years that I'm like, oh, I can't get past this feeling. It is that we need to do a better job collectively caring for the caregivers in our communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that sort of selfishly, honestly, like when we started getting into activism or even just trying to like tend to community issues, there were a number of ways in which I felt like I wasn't being cared for in return. Sometimes it was like people presenting an expectation that like you'll come and do this work for free because because you're passionate about it, or even just like the I don't know, like the feeling of like standing in a rally or like sitting in the Capitol for hours and hours and hours to get your like needs met, your communal needs met. Like those things are not done without sacrifice. And so I think, and then I'll say this, something I've noticed a lot in these movements is that in a lot of ways right now, they're being led by our women, our Indigenous and Black women. And so women are already conditioned to do work for free. We already sort of take the back seat and don't demand enough of our value. Mm-hmm. So I'm at a point where I just don't want that anymore for myself or for my sisters who I see like pounding the pavement, who I am meeting now, who are in that MMIW space, Lauren, who are like organizing the searches for our missing sisters. I want more for the women who are fighting against like the clutches of death, literally, that our governments have on our death row inmates, some of whom are innocent. These women are putting everything they have, volunteering everything they have.
They're feeding babies. They're putting shoes on people's feet.
Yeah.
They're,
yes. People.
It's,
yeah.
And I think, I don't know.
And then they go home to like canned chili. Wait, I should just... No, this conversation is so long, but sorry, not to co-opt your moment.
No, we need a whole episode just on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
She's like, but seriously, let's do that. I'm totally down. I really am.
Yeah. It's wild to me, and I just feel like, I don't know, I just feel like we need some better mutual aid. We need some better expectations for what activism is valued at.
Yeah.
We need organizations who are willing to fund projects like what we're talking about. All of those things combined, I think, would create a healthier community for everybody if we can support those who are trying to support all of us collectively. So I've definitely been on the receiving end of feeling unsupported, but I also know that I've taken for granted some of the people in my life who are literally working after hours to like make my life better and to keep me safe. So I really want to see that. And I think that, there's some ideas in mind that I have for how we can do that. But yeah, that's my personal goal.
I love this, you guys. So tell the listeners what's your next upcoming event and how can they support you guys at this event? Do you need donations? Do you want people to show up, etc.?
Yes.
Thanks for the platform to be able to speak on this. This is really important work. So the Wild Mother is doing a second Send Flowers To installment. And we have chosen missing and murdered Indigenous women, Two-Spirit girls, femme, trans, non-binary relatives as a spotlight. So we have been welcomed by the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City as a host to this installation. It'll be around an event called Remembering Our Missing. So it runs from May 7th through the 9th. So we'll be a part of a list of contributing community members or collaborators is what I think they're calling us. And so essentially, we'll be working alongside of a handful of florists who will come from all parts of the United States to Oklahoma to help install floral installations. So these are large-scale floral installations to not only educate on this issue, but also to celebrate the women who are actively missing or have been murdered. That is per the request of families who are here in Oklahoma, and they are, a part of like MMIW communities, like chapters here in Oklahoma. So anyway, we welcome any and every person who wants to pitch into this project. Practically speaking, work like ours requires a lot of money. So we have positioned ourselves as, caregivers in this work. And in order to make it work, we need things like, flowers. Like flowers are pretty expensive right now in this market, but we're still going to push forward with this work. So this year we're accepting, obviously, like monetary donations. So there's a GoFundMe that's set up. If you visit our Instagram, it's just at The Wild Mother. There's a link in our bio to the GoFundMe.
I'll be sure to link that in the show notes as well.
Oh, awesome. But then also, if this podcast reaches the ears of a flower wholesaler or someone that has access, like a retailer that has access to faux or silk flowers or dry flowers, we are accepting donations of those kind as well. And then there's some other like hometown hero asks that we have. So we'll be hosting those florists that I mentioned in Oklahoma. So it would be nice to have, hospitality things for them. Last year we put together volunteer care bags, and there were friends from like the social club and Plenty Mercantile and other businesses that pitched into those bags. This year I think it would be great to have that type of stuff too, but also if we could help feed some of the team, that would help a great deal. So the information about this project, Send Flowers to MMIW, is located on our website. So it's thewildmother.com/sendflowers2. And there's a look back on Send Flowers to Greenwood and just how effective that work was. And, the breakdown, like how much we were able to raise and who we were able to impact in Tulsa. And then there's also just a projection for this spring. So yeah, May 7th through the 9th at First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City, we will install for Send Flowers to MMIW.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then also another question, if someone wants to book you guys for a conversation workshop either in their home or at their workplace, how will they go about that and what are the costs associated? Not to put you guys on the spot, but just in case they're like wondering if it's in their budget, to know that they can like really reach out and ask and book you guys, what would that look like for them?
So the Conversation Workshops has a website. It's conversationworkshopsok.com. And there are links to that in our all of our social platforms. But the cost is for an online, just your self-paced experience through that is $119 per person. It comes with like 100+ pages of an incredible like guide through the work, and also lots of other resources and links to help you deepen your understanding of the topic. And then lots of videos that we had like professionally shot, so it's easy to look at. It's a great way to spend time with us. But yeah, and then if you are looking to host a bit more of an in-depth like time that's more facilitated by us in person, I can send like pricing packets and guides, but that 119 number is a good gauge for about what you would spend per person. But one thing, the Conversation Workshops is a project on our 501c3 that's called the James and Elnora Boykin Arts and Culture Foundation, where we run a lot of these projects. So like even Lauren's request for donations or even sponsorships, all of those are funneled through our foundation. And if there's anybody out there who would like to just donate to the workshop, to provide like free access to any group, I think that would be a really cool thing that we could do together to help spread access. But yeah, just a note that all of this is tax deductible when you're giving to our organization.
That's super important. That can be a make or break. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And
Yeah.
then where can they find your social media? If you guys would shout out your handles, I will go ahead and link them also in our show notes for you guys for easy access, but just let people know what they are.
Okay, so the Wild Mother is at the Wild Mother. That's our main floral page that has sort of turned into also a hub for conversations about identity and activism and all of those things. So you can see a lot of it there. There's an Instagram called 4 Hour Healing. And that one hosts the activism, the more like specific conversations about systemic racism. My personal handle is Leah A. Palmer. We have a sister whose handle is I'm Not From California. That's Callie. And she does amazing work with us on all of these projects. And then Lauren, do you have handles you want to shout out?
Yeah, so my personal handle is Lauren Landback. And yeah, I share like flowers and I don't know, like just my life on there. And then also I started this like very personal like process of reconnection. So that, like I mentioned earlier, it began when I was 19, and in the course of that process, I found beadwork, so bead embroidery, and that's something that has been really fun for me to dig into. And I was encouraged by my sisters and my friends to share that work. So yeah, my beadwork can be found at Landmark Beadwork. I share every now and then, and sometimes I have things available for people to grab for their heirloom beadwork collections. So yeah, that I think that's it for me.
Perfect. Well, I hope you guys will all go and check out their beautiful artwork, whether it's beading or florals or their family heritage. Their social media accounts are some of my favorite to follow. So go seek them out. And thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you, Annie.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider becoming a patron of our podcast. For $7.99 a month, you can unlock tons of perks like breaking news text messages so that you're never out of the loop. Tons of bonus episodes are already up there ready for you to binge, and a discussion board full of networking opportunities and much more. Go to www.patreon.com/sugarfree media today to become a patron. This is the best way to support our show. Our patrons make News du Jour possible. But a couple other ways to support our podcast are rate and review on whatever podcast platform you use to listen, share on your social media, you have influence, tell your friends, family, and colleagues that you love News du Jour and why you listen. You can also follow us on social media under sugarfreemedia.co on Instagram, just Sugarfree Media, all one word, on TikTok, and sugarfree_media on Twitter. We also have a weekend newsletter called Dreamers Digest that's full of dreamy content recommendations for your weekend and a life update from yours truly. Sign up today on our website, www.sugarfreemedia.co. Our music is by Joey Lavoie and Nicholas Foster. Our cover art is by Hannah Pierce Photography. Our Sugar Free Media logo is by Catherine Jezik Designs. Any twinkling or little footsteps you might hear in the background are by my dog, Rhett. He's a rescue pup and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour. Broadcasting from Oklahoma.